Hi, everybody. I'm Joe.
I'm Derrick.
Matthew is not here tonight, but we are your host for
Beats, Balls, and Bourbon,
the official Groove Machine video podcast for LouCity supporters. This is very unplanned, unscripted, for a couple of reasons we want to get with you tonight. But before we do that, just want to ask Derrick how he's doing tonight.
I'm doing real good.
Yeah, so am I, man. This is a really exciting night for us. The first reason it's exciting is because we have a really great announcement as far as how we're going to be doing our shows from now on. We are moving away from live chat on Facebook, and we are now moving to Twitch TV. Derrick, can you tell us about that?
We're definitely moving to Twitch. It's going to be twitch.tv/Groove Machine 3B. You will be getting a link on Facebook and on, all of the social medias. You will be able to click on that link, and you will be able to watch the stream on Twitch without having to use an account. However, if you want to participate in chat or use any of the features that we're going to have in there, you will have to make an account. We'll also it will be subscription based, so you can actually come in with Amazon Prime and subscribe to the channel, but we'll give you more on that later.
Excellent, and really looking forward to moving on forward, bigger and better things. And hopefully this will increase the audience viewing and all kinds of things, because we love doing the show, getting a lot of good feedback from everybody. Hashtag 3B podcast. Please make sure that you're using that as well. So I guess we can move on to the second really, really cool thing tonight. We had to do this tonight because his schedule is so packed, and he's got so much going on as an announcer for USL on ESPN Plus, amongst other things. I know he does basketball. We have Mike Watts here tonight, folks, on the phone, I believe from his car or someplace in the, cruising around there. Mike, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. It's great to hear you guys are on a new platform and everything. Hopefully everyone joins you guys on Twitch. And yeah, thankfully out of my car, but at least
okay.
Tonight. Thanks for making an exception.
Right, man. And first off, I really want to thank you for taking the time to do that. We know how busy you are, and as a fan of the game in general, I mean this sincerely, that I think you're doing a fantastic job on not just the Louisville City games, but the other games that we get to listen to you on. Your coverage is really top notch, very thorough, very very intelligently done, and delivered with some humor sometimes as well, which we appreciate. And so I want to thank you for doing all of that. It must be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is, and it's ultimately, I think you guys get it. It's just you fall in love with it.
Yeah.
This is my 5th year with the league, going back to the 2015 final, and to be sort of along the ride for all these great Louisville achievements, the penalty kick wins in the playoffs and the USL championship finals, and
still get chills thinking about
it's been really cool being a part of all this.
Yeah, and appreciate having you along for the ride. But before we even get into the current situation with Louisville City and USL, would really like to go back a little bit. I don't think you've done any of the other podcasts or shows, have you, sir?
Yeah, I've done Soccer City a couple times and just sort of chatted about the league at large, but and I think I'm on Saturday, so
there you go.
Tune into that too, as well as on Twitch next week.
Well, we're big fans of that show. Howie and Lance and Kevin do a good job on that. Very quick shout out to Final Judgment on Mondays and Barrel Proof on Tuesday, the Coopers, and also In the House on Wednesdays, and every now and then we get a little podcast luchador, if you speak Spanish. So shout out to those guys.
Little flavor there.
Little flavor, right. So Howie, take us back a little, and Howie's he does a great job. I'm a big fan of his announcing on the games with Kevin and Lance. They do a great job. So Mike, please take us back before you got involved with ESPN. If you could give us a little bit of background about yourself, we'd love to know more about you.
Yeah, grew up in Cleveland, moved to New York.
Sorry about that. Did I lose you?
No, everything good? We good now?
Yes, we are. We are. I'm sorry.
I grew up in Ohio and moved to New York and graduated in January of 2015.
Okay.
And had left with a business degree and, didn't really know what the future was going to be. And thankfully I got a call to do the 2015 final, and that led to Game of the Week in 2016. And then, Vista started adding a lot of these local TV shows down in Florida. So that's allowed me to sort of jump in with individual teams on a more consistent basis. And that's been a lot of fun. And along the way, started to add some other stuff. And the Bengals preseason games I know air in Louisville, so that's always cool.
How cool is that?
And just sort of little things here and there for ESPN as they'll have me, and you blink and 4 or 5 years have gone right by.
Yeah, man, it does go fast. But I'll tell you what, it's got to be pretty exciting to get phone calls to do and expand your efforts. Tell me a little bit about the whole Vista deal. I mean, some people have asked about that and how all that works. I mean, I know that they do. I know we transitioned over from local broadcast to them. I think it was 2017. And can you tell us a little bit about how all that works, please?
Yeah, so it really is a lot more common than I think people lend credence to. I mean, a lot of MLS broadcasts that you'll watch are being done in a similar format, either integrating the feed that you get from the opponent or doing the actual cutting of the broadcast, the actual production from a studio at the national level, at the regional level. The international stuff that I've done in the past is all off monitor, off tube, whatever you want to call it. So it's become pretty common. Vista does, I think it's 9 or 10 teams and works with local TV affiliates to get those games on TV in those markets, which is a massive step forward from where we were, 4 years ago, where, most teams it's only going to YouTube, and the quality, depending on which market, was pretty spotty. And, I think, in that sense, it's come a tremendous distance. But, during the week, we'll talk with Howie. We'll talk with John Hackworth for half an hour or so and try and make sure we're keeping up to date and read the Courier Journal and what's going on in the market and the good reporting that is being done about the team and listening to the press conferences. And, you just try and make yourself as embedded with the team you're working with that week. Right. And, by the time it's done, of course, I'd rather, be out at the tailgate pregame. And
sure. Who wouldn't be?
You kind of get the game in front of you. And by the time you kind of dig into the game, you do sort of feel like you're there, like you're into it. You really do focus all your attention into the game itself. So, it's become pretty common, but it is technologically way beyond anything that was even imaginable 5 years ago. In that sense, Vista is a really incredible, existence for second division soccer in this country to make it more prominent.
Absolutely, and it makes it a lot easier to reach out with quality announcing to several different markets, which was a bit of a challenge for the teams when we first started. I mean, we were basically just trying to pull people in here and there, and that's a bit of you get what you get, and you appreciate the efforts of everybody. But I have a question for you: is the amount of time people have no idea how much back work goes on in announcing music, all this stuff. How many hours a week do you spend researching and preparing, and how many hours a week are you on the air?
Yeah. Let's take this week, for instance. I'm doing a game Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'm doing CONCACAF League. Nice. And then SEC Network on Thursday night. So, a new team, you'll probably spend 2, 3, 4 hours trying to get somewhat immersed in it. You're going to try and watch the highlights from the most recent game. If you can get the full game, you may actually get a chance to watch all of that.
Okay.
There are weeks where you're doing 6 or 7 games, and so you're talking, up to 25 hours of research for 14 hours worth of actual content on the air. So the best part of having been around Vista as long as I have, you sort of have this dossier of info that you've accumulated from all these conversations you have with coaches and all the research you've done previously. A lot of the guys around the league sort of move within the league year to year. So a lot of that sort of naturally lends itself to you already have the research done, but it's definitely a fair amount of time. I think my fiance wishes I was home a little more right now, but busy time of the year, you just kind of got to deal with it.
It is. It's got to be a lot of work. And the other thing I was wondering about is the experience of doing it offset. Offset's not really a good word. not being on site for a game versus being on site. I would have to assume being on site is more fun because you get to experience. I know I met you once at the tailgate last year. I got to assume it's more fun, but at the same time, there's probably a couple advantages of not doing it on site either. Would you say?
For one, I'm not sweating.
Yeah, there you go.
So that's a major plus.
There you go. As for speaking for those of us that play drums,
positive. Yeah. I did the Open Cup for U.S. Soccer this year, and I'm getting tweets like, "Bro, find air conditioning," because I'm in Orlando and it's like 90% humidity. I'm trying to tell these people I'm dying out here. Okay, do you understand?
Yeah, man, that's crazy.
But that's positive. You're not sitting in traffic in and out of the stadium, but you can do 2-3 games in a day because you can sort of follow the sun across the time zone. So I usually do a Louisville game at 7 and a Fresno game at 10 or 10:30 is typically the way my schedule breaks out week to week. But it lets you see both conferences every week and see every team in the league over the course of the year. Right. So all that stuff is unimaginable in any previous format.
Okay. Now, tell us a little bit about your involvement, not so much your involvement, but your impression. I know this is almost a loaded question because we're Louisville City supporters, and I'm trying not to do that. But to me, as a person who didn't grow up in the area, this has really been an amazing experience, regardless of how much I enjoy being with the folks and being with the team. Just as a person who's, you have some sort of involvement with the team, but you're not dug in 24/7. Tell me about what you think about what it feels like and the personal experience you're having working with the folks out here.
Yeah, I'll say this. I think it would be easy to say, hey, he's being a brown-noser when he says certain things on the broadcast.
Right.
When we're talking about the new stadium,
right.
I'm genuinely in awe of the stadium that's going up. I think the light fixtures are totally unique. I love the actual bowl of it, the way the suites are laid out. Like, I'm a giant stadium nerd, so for me, I'm looking at this going, hey, get your season tickets, but I really do mean, like, this stadium is awesome.
It is pretty amazing. And
I saw a picture of grass going down today.
Yes, they just started putting, that's right, they just started putting grass down. Yeah. And now, how much involvement have you had going to MLS venues over the last couple of years? Have you been to several of them?
Yeah, I've been to, I think at this point I've been to 9 MLS venues over the last 3 years.
Okay, and maybe a little bit of a comparison between what you're seeing happening here in those venues that you've already been into?
Yeah, naturally it's a little bit smaller. That's to be expected. There are a couple, and I'm not going to name names, but there are a couple stadiums where I'd much rather go to the game in Louisville than to go to the game at some other venues.
Sure.
I think it's right-sized.
Right.
Ultimately, like Red Bull Arena, I think is this phenomenal venue.
Yes, it is. Beautiful stadium.
I've been there probably 10, 15 times. I live in the New York area.
So I grew up.
So
I don't know if you know this, Mike, but I grew up in Kearney, the town right next to where that stadium is.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's seeing that there. Without getting into anything MLS or studio, that it really is the inside of that stadium is very, very impressive.
Yeah, it really, that was my first experience in working around MLS when I was a student reporter at WFUV at Fordham, which is an NPR affiliate. So we were credentialed to all 13, I think, pro teams in the New York area. So
right.
I was a college sophomore, and going to the Rangers Stanley Cup Finals back in I guess I was 12.
That's a long time ago.
So, like Red Bull Arena, the press box is actually one row off the field. So my first experience watching professional soccer on a regular basis was watching Thierry Henry from 20 yards away, and you're just like, that's amazing. My God. Yeah. But the venue's great too, and I think Louisville could stand up with just about any venue in this country. I was just at Minnesota. It's incredible.
Right, so I've heard.
There's some good venues for sure, but Louisville is really impressive what they've done. I think it's the class of the league when it's done. Yeah,
and we're all looking forward to. We had Derrick. You were at the walkthrough. You were You know, and
I was very awestruck at the.
Yeah, it's and I'm not even a stadium geek type guy like that. But every time I drive by it, I'm just like, look at that place, it's amazing.
Yeah, I've said it before. Every time I get stuck in traffic out there, I'm thrilled.
Yeah, and I guess tell us a little bit from a culture perspective. I mean, you've done once again. You've seen a lot. I don't know if people really appreciate how unique the experience has been here at Louisville City. We've changed coaches in the middle of the season. I mean, we had the one deal where, you know, our coach is doing the groundbreaking on one day and the very next day he's leaving. And then we got 3 players coaching the team, and then we have a new coach come in. And we've managed to keep pace, and we've had our ups and downs this season. But, you know, they're a freight train again. That's definitely, you know, I don't want to say our fans take that for granted, because that's not fair. I haven't spoken to all of them. But I think, Mike, you can agree that that is definitely not the norm for professional sports teams, certainly at the USL level.
No, I think what people need to realize is, and I don't say this derogatorily, it's just a genuine fact, going to a conference final or better every single year
amazing.
Is frankly unsustainable as it is amazing, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
It, in any other sport, we're talking about the Warriors dynasty. We're talking about, you know, the you know, whether it was the Heat or whatever in the NBA or the Patriots dynasty. And, you know, I know this isn't quite that level of public knowledge where the whole country is watching, but I mean, that's what we're talking about right now. The fact that, you know, this team doesn't have the biggest budget in the league. It's, you know, building a stadium, which certainly sort of runs into the pockets of the owners, and that was a huge undertaking. You know, it's hard to be this competitive, and forget competitive, to win this much for this long. It's a lot of extra miles on these guys' tires. I mean, to do this every year is just crazy. So I'm not saying that Louisville fans are spoiled or, you know, that they don't understand what they have.
And they're generally not.
Please make sure you enjoy that.
Right, and I'm not saying that they are, but it's just sometimes I think, you know, when you have the level of success that this team's had so early, and you sustain it through so many things and have so many tremendous moments. You mentioned, you know, one of them I always just go back to is the shootout against Red Bull 2 years ago, which is just I mean, it's the amount of good that we've had dropped on our lap, and then we have a stadium that we're coming to. You know, you just want everybody to appreciate it, right?
Yeah, well, and like the funny thing about that penalty shootout against Red Bull 2 is I still feel bad because I don't think Richard Ballard wants to be Richie forever, but
here
I am going, you know, the little Richie Ballard.
Yeah, it's hard not.
He's stuck with this forever now.
Right.
I call that game the Great Stadium Migration of 2017.
Yeah, it was amazing watching everybody run over to the other side. Was something. Okay, so
that's good.
Give us your impressions of Louisville City going into what will. I mean, they're in the playoffs. I'm pretty sure that's pretty much a done deal. Give us your impressions of the team and what you're seeing right now.
Yeah, I'll admit this, because even you talk to John week to week, and he'll go, yeah, we dug ourselves a pretty big hole at the outset of the year. The tough part is not getting home games. I mean, the Eastern Conference, in part because of Louisville, in part because of how good New York and Rochester have been in years past.
Right.
You know, the number 1 seed, or last year is the number 2 seed, you know, all home games all the way to the final and then in the final itself. So, you know, that's a big loss. The LouCity is an organization has never gotten out of a playoff game on the road.
That's
they
correct.
have advanced every time at home. So hopefully something gives there, because it's looking like 5 or 6 is where the team is going to end up, although there is a possibility they could sneak into 4 or 3, or fall into 7 where they get a home game in the preliminary round. So all that aside, if you look at the first 3 or 4 months of the year, I think you're figuring out what's the best way to play your outside backs. You know, Sean Francis being on the left and Oscar on the right, the best possibility. You lose Paolo. You know, you're trying to figure out, you know, how to work Luke in, but also deal with, is Lucky M. Kosana your guy?
Right.
Ombi's hurt. I mean, it's like it was always something. And the goalkeeper injuries. Like, you know, I know as an academy kid, but they just signed another one.
They just signed another keeper. That's right.
Know, yeah, come on, man.
It comes at you from so many different directions.
Now, wow, you know, here we go.
So, and there's only 5 regular season home games. And you mentioned something about the standings. It's been a little weird the last couple of weeks. Red Bull's struggling. Tampa was struggling a little bit. You've got St. Louis, who basically the first half of the year was on fire, and then the second portion of the year were dead, and now they're back on fire. Pittsburgh's been having a real good run. Maybe for everybody that's listening, give us a couple of teams that you would consider a major, the major teams that we'd have to deal with going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, if you're talking about like Pittsburgh, they've only lost, I think, twice in 16 or 17 games.
Yep.
So they were sort of in that same boat at the start of the year where they were just a little slow. They were conceding more than a Bob Lilly team tends to concede.
Right.
And they figured it out. St. Louis, it was the Open Cup. I mean, the Open Cup absolutely creamed. I mean, the fact that Louisville finished second last year while dealing with the same kind of Open Cup run is fairly staggering.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Base, much less working with 3 coaches.
Yep, and it's not like they had a super deep roster either. And they were dealing with injury. That's the other thing. Louisville was dealing with injuries during the Open Cup run last year, and they still managed to win the whole thing. It's just so bizarre. Right. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I like to tell people like Hubbard was on the bench 25 times last year as the third goalkeeper.
Right. It's amazing.
So he was getting win bonuses if those are in his deal. So that's positive, I guess. But I mean, I think Red Bull on a given day could give you a run. I think they missed Sean Nealis a ton against Louisville on Saturday because Jordan Scarlett getting pulled off at halftime as a center back is about as damning a statement as you're going to find. So I thought that was a struggle for them. They were stretching the game out. They didn't quite have the right pieces to pull that off, although that's sort of their MO.
Okay.
Tampa Bay could beat anybody on a given day. I think they're starting to figure it out again, but they're so defensively stingy. Yeah. I think Indy is the best team in the conference, if I'm being completely honest.
Okay.
And if they, with their games in hand, finish first, they haven't lost at home since July 4th last year.
That's amazing.
So that's a difficult. I mean, Louisville had a similar run where it was like 20 games in a row they hadn't lost at home. They're on a similar run to that. I mean, I think they've got everything lining up for them to go make a run. But, soccer's a beautiful game for a reason.
Hear that. And is there a team maybe in the conference that's up there that may be struggling from a roster perspective with injuries that you think they may have to overcome where other teams are relatively healthy?
Yeah, I think most teams are fairly healthy. I mean, let's say Louisville fell into the 7 slot. I mean, Birmingham lost Chandler Hoffman, but they've managed to use MLS loanees like, Brian Wright. And, those guys have stepped in and scored the goals that I think they thought Chandler was going to score. And obviously I know Louisville fans have a love-hate relationship a little bit with Chandler for, running up the score for 6 months and then sort of flaming out at the end. But, he's a goal scorer epitomized.
Yes, he is.
Where, like he gets hot and then he gets cold.
Right.
I mean, I don't think anyone's dealing with some drastic injury issue that's gonna derail their season.
I have a feeling Nashville might jump on the struggle bus. Maybe.
I know it's hard for you to comment on that because you have to call the game. So we're not. But I will.
It's not even that. It's just like I'm not totally. I was never totally bought into them at the start of the year because I wasn't quite sure how Cam and Belmar and Rios were all going to coexist.
Okay, that's a good point. That's a very good point.
I think the guys they brought in on MLS deals for next year, like Derrick Jones, I think he's an immensely talented player. Okay. But I wouldn't be surprised if they don't win the cup. I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of struggle. If it's the 4-5 game right now, Pittsburgh at Nashville, I think that's a toss-up.
Okay. And I guess one other thing I'd ask you is, is there a team that really isn't meeting expectations right now that you looked at and you said, well, I thought we'd get a little bit more out of them this year?
Yeah. I mean, your first thought naturally is like, why is Louisville in 7th? And that's a totally loaded question, right?
Right,
so I don't think that's adequate. I don't think that's the right approach. I look at everybody below them, and I'm kind of going, that's more or less what I thought. I mean, St. Louis had such a great Open Cup run. If you take that out, they're a 1.8 point per game team minus the time they were in the Open Cup, which, you're talking about team on, 55 to 56 points, and they're literally competing for first place in the league. So St. Louis, I guess, technically fills that role. Everyone else, 1 through 7, maybe you could, haggle a couple, one up, one down, or a couple up, couple down. But I mean, they're more or less where I thought they'd be.
Right, and I think that you start looking at the quality of this league and the quality of competition just in the last 3 years. It's just gone up so much. I mean, it doesn't really surprise me. I didn't expect Louisville to be too high up in the standings this year. I was expecting like maybe a 4th or 5th place finish this year. When we saw the rosters, I really wasn't expecting anything. But I mean, with all the experience, having as good a chance as anybody to move forward. But the one team that really it boggles my mind because of everything that they've been through and they've managed to keep everything together is Bethlehem Steel, having been moved from Lehigh, having to deal with playing and they kept the team name and they moved it like 90 miles away. I mean, there's so many struggles that these teams in this league, and they're just one example of teams that have right now. Swope Park Rangers dealing with some things as far as what stadium they're playing in and how they want them to go back to where they were. I just don't think I think people sometimes take for granted how difficult it is for some of these teams just to put teams on the field. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think more so than the stadium issue for Bethlehem, we're talking with the coach at the start of the year, and he just goes, all right, just so you know, we've had a philosophical change with the, soccer operations group within the Philadelphia Union.
Right.
We're going to go younger. They sold all their draft picks to Cincinnati. So you're getting none of these 22, 23-year-old guys that an MLS team thought, it's worth using a pick on this guy.
Yeah.
They went totally away from that. And while the Union Academy is good, and like Brendan Aronson is a really good player, and there's like 4 or 5 guys there where you're like, hey, these guys are going to be MLS caliber players, and that's fantastic. But not right now, not at 17 years old.
Right.
So that's sort of the issue with Bethlehem more than anything in my mind.
Okay.
But, I agree that every team has their cross to bear.
Right. And what's really weird in this country, before I move on to some of the West stuff, we're still sort of trying to sort out the whole university draft pick thing versus the academy thing. I was wondering, since you've had an opportunity to see so many teams, can you give us a little bit of a perspective on some of the teams that maybe have something built up or are working hard to build up local academies versus the draft pick thing, or like you were just talking about with MLS, the super draft, where the rest of the world really doesn't have to deal with that. Can you give us a perspective?
Yeah, I think I think independent teams in USL Championship, I think you look at what Phoenix has done with their League 2 franchise, which is now League 1 in FC Tucson, and their academies sort of coming up. I think the one thing people forget about San Antonio is that Darren Powell is an incredible developer of young talent.
Okay.
So in terms of building up the academy in San Antonio, where you've got all that space, I think that's positive.
Wow.
And underratedly, St. Louis FC is, the byproduct of St. Louis Scott Gallagher, which is arguably one of the top 5 independent creators of talent outside the MLS system for academy players. So you give them that, and then like at the MLS level, Red Bull's academy is flipping loaded. I think Kansas City has done an incredible job of doing that with Swope Park over the years. I hope LA Galaxy 2 gets to the point where they can really dig into that market, because there's a ton of really good young players there. So, Dallas obviously has been the apple of everybody's eye, and they just put a team in North Texas for League 1.
Okay.
Finally, those guys can move up.
And then I guess it's going to lead me, before we get into, I was going to ask you some League 1 and 2 things. But I think the first thing is to give us a little bit of a perspective on what's going on in the West, specifically that amazing run Phoenix just came off of. And tell us about Asante, because it looks like he's just absolutely taken over down there with Phoenix.
Yeah, he has.
So if you have, just give us some perspective on what's going on in the West.
Yeah, I mean, I think Phoenix is, and I just spoke with Rick Shantz about it. The playoffs are the playoffs, and you never know how it's going to shake out.
Right.
But for 34 games, undoubtedly, they were the best team in the West this year. And, I understand the East-West dynamic where I think if you took the top 8 teams in the league, I would bet 5 or 6 are Eastern teams,
Okay.
and then 2 or 3 are in the West. So maybe
Right.
it's a little, top heavy, but 20 straight wins. I mean, that's like, it's never happened in American soccer. It may never happen again.
Yeah.
We're talking like Manchester City stuff
Right,
here
right,
in terms
exactly.
of running up wins. So, Fresno played the literal perfect game
Mm-hmm.
against them, and Asante missed 2 penalties, or they could have won anyways. Asante last year, I don't want to say played under Drogba's shadow or anything. It really wasn't like that out there, but
Right.
the way they're playing this year with, I think it's 78 goals in 30 games.
Jesus.
There's naturally more in that wide open style of play that they do play,
Mm-hmm.
and the way they utilize him, like naturally his numbers are going to be impressive. But as impressive as they are, that kid, and he's older than me, so I should that
Right,
kid.
right.
He's like 5'6" or 5'5" or whatever. He's this small guy and diminutive, but he's got this personality to him where like he's fun loving, but you can tell he wants to put the whole organization on his back. He won Champions League in Africa.
Did he really?
People don't realize what an incredible player he was
I didn't
before
even
he
know
came
that.
here. This was, an opportunity for him to come play in the States. So, yeah, he's legit.
That's phenomenal. Also, you mentioned League One and League Two. Have you done any broadcasting for any of those games?
I have not. I've had some League One and League Two teams for the Open Cup.
Okay. Looks like for first year, just as an assessment, you have some involvement. It looks like they've had pretty successful years with both of those leagues. It looks like to me, anyway. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think their goal is to bring professional soccer into more markets. Yep. And if you look at it in that context, Madison, Lansing, Greenville, I think John Harkes has done a great job in Greenville. They're a playoff team and everything, and the fan base is good. Madison, in terms of their social engagement,
yes.
The whole Mingo stuff is like a manna from heaven for social media. But in the end, it's probably North Texas is to lose, and that's because they've got this great pipeline of FC Dallas talent that has sort of hit the bottleneck and never broken through, and now they've got pro games for them to play in that is at the right level. So I think the League One, I don't want to call it experiment, project, whatever, has gone really well, and the attendance numbers, from what I can tell, are pretty good.
Pretty good.
I think it's sustainable, so that's positive.
And I guess as a fan, now you can't. Nobody knows the answer to this really because we don't know what's coming down the road. The argument for USL for a lot of soccer fans in the United States that are not following MLS is that they're hoping it to be more of a traditional promotion relegation type deal. I have personal. I am for it eventually. I don't think we're ready yet. I think the infrastructure is not there. We're not even close. But what do you think? Do you think if they can get the infrastructure together, they can get these smaller teams in facilities that can handle it? Something that's worth pursuing? Or obviously we're talking years down the road. I know the purists hate that, but I'm somewhere in the middle with all of that stuff. You got the purists on one side who just think we should blow everything out. That's wrong. And then you got the MLS folks, in my opinion, who are like, no, that's the worst thing ever. I think they're wrong too. But to have that type of structure, I think would be great, specifically for those smaller markets that have never had it. You can talk about teams like Tormentus, and you're talking about Greenville, and you're talking about these cities that have had teams for a long time. They deserve a crack, as far as I'm concerned. But what do you think about that whole deal?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think League Two is a little bit interesting because it's so dependent on the college system. A lot of those guys will come in and play the 12, 13, 14 games over their summer.
Excellent point.
And so it just sort of fits that format. So, League Two, I think that's maybe a big ask. In terms of promotion, relegation, in League One and the championship, I think that's hugely compelling. And I've actually grown a lot in that thought over the last 3-4 years, where I used to be like, enough of this crap. Can we just move on? I don't want to talk about it.
Right, absolutely.
I'm kind of going like, I'm with you on this. I just don't think you're there yet. You look at a team like Richmond, right? They were in USL, the second division for 20 years and, hugely successful for long periods of time. And they sort of looked at their balance sheet and sort of said, I think the better fit for us right now is League One.
Right.
okay. Like I think that's a fair point. I hope in 20 years the development of soccer makes it such that, like a team like Richmond going to MLS, you sit there and you go like, okay, now Zlatan's coming, or like
right,
the equivalent,
right.
like, oh, here's Manchester United at our stadium,
of course,
so to speak. Like I hope that happens, but I think we're still a little ways away.
Yeah.
I think USL will probably lead in terms of that, but like how it's going to affect the pyramid on the whole, that I'm like genuinely, I can't wait to see how everything shakes out 20 years from now. If there's one reason I want to zoom forward 20 years and find something out, I want to see where the pyramid and where the leagues are and promotion relegation then. Like I'm very excited to see that.
Yeah, I think I am as well. And I just, the point is to do, if we're going to do it in an intelligent manner that's cost effective. And look, it's not like teams are getting in. It's not like there's owners getting into USL now over the last couple of years who didn't know that this is a possibility. Okay, because Edwards has talked about this for a couple of years now. So if you're willing to buy a franchise in USL, especially in Division One, you have to know that this is looming. You know what I'm saying? As opposed to the MLS thing, where it's never going to happen.
And even MLS, like when they stop expanding, maybe they sit there and go like, okay, there's no more expansion fees. There, the second division's thriving. I mean, maybe they sit there and go like, all right, I think we're ready for this.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how that's going to shake out, but like Jake Edwards has been fairly transparent about what he thinks the future of this is, and let's not forget. I mean, he came through USL briefly. He went through the English pyramid. I mean,
yep.
He knows all that, and I think he's well aware that that's something that the league is interested in doing in the future, because he's made it quite publicly clear.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're looking forward to that too. I mean, here in Louisville, we're sort of, if you're looking at it from a competition standpoint, what else do we have to do? I mean, we've been to the conference final 4 times, and I think we have a legit shot at getting there again.
I agree.
Final question about USL, and I got to ask you this since you have some knowledge. Somebody's shows up at your house and he says, we need to know immediately who you think's going to be in the final. pretend I'm Uncle Luigi from Hoboken.
I said, get the hell off my porch.
Yeah. So give us a couple teams from each conference that, without holding your feet to the fire too hard. Give us a couple teams that you think from each conference that are legit chances to get there.
Yeah, all due respect to everybody else, because again, it's a crazy world. You never, like Swope Park, I never would have picked to have gotten out 2 years ago, just because I looked at where they were in the standings and I go, oh man, they'd have to play multiple road games, and then they literally, as a 4 seed, never went on the road because of all the upsets.
Mm-hmm.
So all that in mind. In the West, I think Phoenix, Fresno, and Orange County are the 3 that I think are most likely, in that I think Phoenix is going to have the most trouble with Fresno and Orange County's style specifically.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I think Phoenix has to be the favorite. I mean, they've been dominant for like 7 months.
Yeah, it's been pretty amazing. It's been pretty amazing.
In the East, I think Indy is probably my favorite.
Okay.
I just think they're really talented. I could see them finishing first and being at home the whole time.
Right.
I do think Pittsburgh, Louisville, and Tampa Bay, in my mind, are all kind of in that same, that next group where I go, any of them would win it. I wouldn't go, wow, what a shock. I mean, like, genuinely, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I mean, look at Louisville on 50 points with a game in hand on Nashville and Tampa Bay. I mean, like, legitimately, they'd go be a top 4 team. And
only 6 points out of first now.
I know.
Which is amazing. I can't believe it. 5 games could go with 6 out. It's been such a crazy year.
To jump 5 teams, like, I know it's only 6 points, but like, you're asking 5 teams to lose simultaneously. I know you're not saying that.
Right. No. I'm just the fact that they're the fact that they even get a sniff at that at the top spot. I mean, they're not going to get there. I think 6th place, 6th or 5th at the best is going to happen. It'd be wonderful to get to 4th though, and get one of those home games. But I think that has to be the legitimate goal. But then again, you're only talking 4 points out with 5 left. That's a little more realistic, I think. And I think we play a couple of those teams. We're playing Nashville. I know we play them, and we got Tampa Bay this weekend, big game. What about?
Well, by the way, I just talked to an Eastern Conference coach who I won't name.
Okay.
I lead a question on the call. I go, hey, Coach, I think 6th is a little too far away from you, and I don't think you're going to get there. And he goes, really? I'm like, well, I mean, here's how I read the math. He goes, no, I know that's not.
Right.
He's yanking my chain.
I hear you.
But I think anywhere from 3 to 7 is a possibility for Louisville. If I'm being completely honest.
Okay, so that's great. And to get the insight from you, who you've got your finger on this, the pulse of this whole deal, since you're so active. I mean, it's invaluable to us here, and we really appreciate you coming on. But I do have a couple more questions relative to yourself. And first question is, what do you see happening from a career perspective? Obviously, when you hit the big time in a few years, you'll remember us. Right? Seriously, career aspirations. I mean, what do you think? I thought, and like I said, Mike, I know I've got you on the show, and we really appreciate it. But what I'm telling you, I sincerely mean. You do a fantastic job on these broadcasts, and man,
I appreciate it.
And what do you? Is there anything that there's plenty of different sports out there. What other sports do you have a passion for? What if somebody turned to you 10 years from now? What do you dream? What do you see yourself doing? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's so cliched for an announcer to say this, where it's like they're all like my children. They're just different, right? So I did the NFL preseason for the Bengals, and I came back to doing soccer, and I love doing football. I grew up in Ohio. I'm a football guy by nature. My family is. And I'm like, man, I sort of miss the ebb and flow of soccer and the way you can sort of pick and choose your moments to, sort of take a humorous approach to something, or to sort of lay out and let the crowd and let the groove machine get at it.
Hear that?
Through the broadcast, and it's like I want to do multiple sports for a long time. I'm really happy with sort of the group I work with at ESPN, and
That's awesome.
Long may it continue.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do football and basketball, and a ton of soccer, and I do enjoy calling softball and baseball and lacrosse, and so I do a little bit of everything, and I hope that sort of sticks. I mean, I hope that. I think every announcer wants to work a network job, but at age 26, I'm sitting here going, I'm calling NFL games. I'm the lead voice of a soccer league in this country. It can't be any better than it is right now.
Right.
I almost don't want to look 10 years down the line, because I'm worried it's going to be worse.
I hear you, pal. And then I guess one more question. You said something about being engaged. Right. So tell us a little.
I did, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that wonderful woman and what you have planned in the future there.
Yeah, she is a really wonderful woman. She's a girl I met at Fordham, and Olivia is, it's funny. My roommate in college knew her roommate, and to me, I just find it funny that she wandered into my dorm room.
Wow.
It just sort of happened. I mean, it's pure luck, and I didn't know my roommate before we started rooming together my sophomore year. So, it just took a couple things falling in the right place. We lived in the same dorm for a year and never even knew each other. And, I fell for her, which is obvious now.
Right.
And, she's a special ed teacher out on Long Island in New York.
Wow.
And
Okay.
I just think she's a saint, man.
Yeah, it
so
takes
I'm
a very
glad she said yes, and that was a long time in the making.
Takes a very special type of person to do that kind of work, and her and I have something in common, because I wandered into some dorm rooms in my day. Might have been a little bit. I'm not sure I knew where I was.
Special ed teacher. That's why she fell for you. I'm like, whoa there.
I was going to say. I mean, I wandered into a few. I might not have known where I was going, but college was a little different back in the '80s. So, but man, Mike, I want to tell you, it's so much appreciation for you to come on and taking a few minutes with us. Hope you had a good time, and hopefully we can get you on again sometime before the championship. You can give us a few minutes and let us know what you think is going to happen.
No, whenever I can pop on, happy to do so. Sorry to the people watching, listening. Like I know I sort of screwed up the schedule here a little bit.
Not at all. Not at all. No, just
appreciate you guys making time.
Worked out perfect. Michael Watts, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, Michael, and have a good night and good luck to you.
Thank you. Cheers.
All right, bye. Michael Watts.
Michael Watts.
That's a lot of fun, right? I mean, a lot of good insight there. I mean, and you see a young guy like that, so young, having that kind of career path in front of him. It really is pretty awesome.
That's pretty sweet.
Yes. So
he's got a heck of a gig, man.
Yeah, man. Can you imagine doing all that stuff? But so there you go, folks. That was Mike Watts, and we'll be posting that and really good information. And also, once again, as you know, Twitch TV will be our new platform starting next week. We have Dave Walkovic coming on next week. He is the ticket dude.
The ticket dude.
The ticket dude. He's going to be on, and also we're going to have a couple of supporters, Aaron Leibson and Matthew Hamilton, who is one of our capos, and a lot of good stuff planned in the future. Hope you're enjoying this #3B podcast for a surprise show. That was a lot of fun.
It was fun.
There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you again next week. Hope you had a good time, and we'll talk to you soon.
See you guys.